Good morning. Today's scripture reading is from the book of Judges, verses 7:23 to 8:3. And the men of Israel were called out from Naphtali and from Asher and from all Manasseh, and they pursued after the Midianites. Then Gideon sent messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim, saying, "Come down against the Midianites and seize the waters against them, as far as Beth-barah and also the Jordan." So all the men of Ephraim were called out, and they seized the waters as far as Beth-barah and also the Jordan. They captured the two captains of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and Zeb they killed at the winepress of Zeb, as they pursued the Midianites. They brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon beyond the Jordan. Then the Ephraimites said to him, "What have you done to us, not to call us when you went to fight against the Midianites?" And they upbraided him violently. So he said to them, "What have I done now in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? God has given into your hands the captains of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. What have I been able to do in comparison with you?" When he said this, their anger against him subsided. That is the word of the Lord.
Good morning, everyone. God bless you. It's fair to say that the majority of things we do, the majority of choices we make in our lives, are just not that consequential. They don't impact our lives in a big way, and they may barely impact others. I'll give you an example. When I go to my favorite deli to pick up lunch, I'm assailed by choices. Should I get a roast beef sandwich or a turkey club, or maybe a burger and fries? If I haven't made up my mind, by the time it's my turn to order, I might just feel a little pressure because of the lunch crowd waiting behind me, just waiting for me to just get on with it already. But at the end of the day, it's not a life or death choice. I'll just order the turkey club. And when I say the words turkey club, please, it's not like a bunch of people behind me will suddenly start smacking themselves on the head saying, "Oh, the humanity! Why? Why?" The fate of nations doesn't rest on my decision. If I later find out it was a bad idea, I can walk back that choice the next time I go there. No skin off my butt. So let's say I get the turkey club on Monday and it wasn't that great. On Tuesday, I'll go with the roast beef. No big deal. And I'm not hurting anyone. But there are moments in life when our choices are incredibly consequential. And those choices can't be walked back. There are things we do that impact others, and those actions can't be undone. If I lose my temper and raise my voice at my wife, I can't unring that bell. I don't have the power to undo the hurt and pain I just caused her. I can't magically unbreak what's already been broken. Instead, I have to pick up the pieces. I have to deal with the consequences and try the best I can to make things right between us again. Of course, what's better than picking up the pieces in the aftermath is if I had been more thoughtful, more gracious, more loving in that moment. And so it is for all of us. There are pivotal moments in life when everything can turn upon a single choice a single action, a single phrase, a single word. There are times in life when what we do goes far beyond us and touches our families, our communities, our world. Put another way, in the pivotal moments of our lives, the things we say, the things we do can actually make a difference. In those moments, we have the power to shatter or to heal, to push down or lift up, to bring hate and conflict into a situation, or love and reconciliation. As Christians, we have to be especially mindful, because in those moments we prove who we really are. In those moments we can either bring trouble to the world and shame to our faith, or we can bless people and cause the world to glorify God. The book of Judges, chapters 6 through 8, relates how the Israelites were cruelly oppressed by the Midianites for 7 years. The Midianites, with their vast hosts, would raid the land whenever they wanted and take everything. The people were left impoverished and even starved. When the Israelites cried out to God for mercy and deliverance, God lifted up a young man named Gideon from the small clan of Abiezer in the tribe of Manasseh. Gideon was able to muster an army of 32,000 men, but these were long odds against an army of 135,000, a 4-to-1 disadvantage. 22,000 of his 32,000 men were afraid and were happy to go back home when given the chance. But directed by God, Gideon whittled his army even further down to 300 men. That's 450 to 1. Gideon took those 300 men and encircled the Midianite camp in the wee hours, just as they were changing the guard, when men who'd been up all night keeping watch were looking to get some sleep, and men who'd been sleeping were still trying to wake up. Suddenly, the Midianites in their tents were surprised by the light of 300 torches and the sound of 300 horns blowing. The surprise and commotion caused the entire Midianite host to rout. In the incredible mass confusion, they actually started killing each other, and they scattered far and wide, running for their lives. Gideon called upon the tribes of Naphtali and Asher to aid in the pursuit. And once they approached the Jordan River, he asked the Ephraimites to hold the fords so the enemy would not be able to cross over and make their escape. The Ephraimites did so, and as a bonus, they killed the 2 Midianite captains and brought their heads to Gideon. Because of this effective cooperation between the 4 tribes, and most importantly, because God was with them, the Israelites completely destroyed the Midianite army. The land would have peace for 40 years. But here in our passage, when Gideon met with the Ephraimites, they told him they were angered and offended because they had not been called upon to join the battle at the outset. Now, this was a dubious claim at best. Ephraim was the largest tribe in the north of Israel. If the Ephraimites truly wanted to battle Midian right from the get-go, they could have done so at any time. And if anything, they could have taken the lead and called out Manasseh and the other tribes to fight, rather than wait to hear the word from Gideon. Still, as wrong as the Ephraimites were, they weren't going to back down. Honor and perhaps a share of the spoils was at stake. Our passage states that they reproached Gideon violently. Now, Gideon's response, which is very poetic, basically came down to this. Look, I know you guys feel disrespected because you weren't in on the heavy lifting at the beginning and were basically assigned cleanup detail. But you guys did a great job. In fact, you actually accomplished more than me and my clan, taking down 2 high-value targets. For all our efforts, our results don't even compare to yours. And our passage relates that when he said this, their anger against him subsided. This was Gideon's pivotal moment, a time of glorious victory that could have turned tragic if he decided to take up the battle of egos started by the Ephraimites and responded in kind. But Gideon chose to bring grace in that moment, to swallow his pride. What could have happened if he'd acted differently? If he'd been prideful and disputatious in that moment, rather than gracious and diplomatic? We all know the answer to that. It's the same thing that always happens when people in positions of responsibility fail to realize the moment is bigger than them. Innocent people get hurt. The Ephraimites were a proud and belligerent tribe. They were ready to fight, and Gideon would have had a second war on his hands. But instead, with a few well-chosen words, he proved himself master of the moment. He took what could have been a horrific outcome and made it good. Make no mistake, Gideon was a brave warrior, but he also had the moral courage to endure an assault on his ego and not allow that to make him petty and hateful. He chose to de-escalate the situation, and it brought peace and unity. I want to leave you with two takeaways. And the first is know who the real enemy is. Know who the real enemy is. After all the risk and hard work Gideon put in, he didn't have to tolerate the arrogance and selfishness of the Ephraimites. He could have answered them harshly. And with the men and resources then at his command, he could probably have taught them a lesson in blood if it came down to it. But he was wise enough to recognize that at the end of the day, the Ephraimites were not the enemy. The real enemy, the Midianites, still had to be dealt with. Gideon knew this was no time to start a second war with his fellow Israelites, because Israel was surrounded by enemies that were more numerous and powerful. Before long, another threat would arise from outside Israel's borders, and only if they remained united would they even have a chance to resist. More than that, he understood that the deadliest enemy of all was the pride and hate that divided brothers. Gideon saw the bigger picture and acted accordingly. Over the last several years, in our country and around the world, we've seen an increase in polarization, the us versus them mentality. Let me make this clear. That kind of thinking has no place in the life of a Christian. Our battle is for hearts and minds and souls. The real enemy is the enemy, capital E. The real enemy is the pride and hate in our own hearts that can cause us to despise our fellow human beings and be in continual enmity with them. Now, we have every right to challenge bad ideas, to expose, refute, invalidate, and even ridicule them when necessary. But the people who hold those bad ideas are not our enemies. They are our brothers and sisters. Now, the second takeaway is see the good. See the good. The Ephraimites came at Gideon puffing out their chests and trying to show that they were the alphas. Gideon could have put them in their place easily enough with a stiff dose of truth. He could have told them, first of all, I don't answer to you. Second, don't front. You come here acting tough, but you only acted after I routed the Midianite armies. You guys are a bunch of cowards and scavengers and Johnny-come-latelys. But instead, he made it clear he was not mad at them. So he didn't have to make out like they were mad at him as a defense mechanism. Yet he did more than that. With humility and graciousness, he made the Ephraimites understand that they were respected and appreciated. Can we do the same thing? Can we be kind and gracious even to people who are toxic and hateful? Beyond just overlooking and forgiving the bad, can we reorient our hearts so that we can actually see the good? Can we push past all the negativity and understand that there is something there worth loving and appreciating and valuing? I know that's not easy. But if we can't, then we're missing the point of this whole Christianity thing. Because there was someone who did that for us. While we were yet sinners, God saw so much value and worth in each and every one of us that he sent his son to die for us. I talked about pivotal moments. We also need to understand the seasons of our lives, because consequential times make for a whole lot of pivotal moments. Apparently, we're living in a season like that right now. The politicians and the media and the celebrities and the botnets and all the other influencers and pot stirrers have us believing that this is one of the most critical times in our history. Our democratic system, our civil society, our entire way of life is under threat like never before. Ever notice they say that every election year? Now, the reason is always the same. It's the other side's fault. They are the enemy. You must hate them and fear them. Oh, forget trying to talk to them and understand them. And the solution is always the same. Just give me your vote and everything will be okay. I will be your knight in shining armor, your savior. It's a strategy that always works because it pulls on two powerful levers in human nature: fear and the need for a hero. How are we Christians supposed to operate in these incredibly polarized and increasingly godless times? We have to understand that people have been lied to. They're continually told by the culture that Christians are self-righteous, hateful, insular, excluding. On top of that, some of us screwed up. Some of us did things that only served to confirm the stereotypes and damage our witness. We need to own that. When people confront us and challenge who we are and what we stand for, we need to be like Gideon. If our mission was to win a war of words, that would be easy. We Christians gird ourselves with a sword of truth, and it's a devastatingly powerful weapon. But we need to wield it judiciously, graciously, because we're not looking to win an argument. The argument's already been won. We're looking to win the people. And most people don't like to be confronted with the truth about themselves. It's human nature to get defensive when our ego, self-image, and reputation are threatened. It's very hard to find a common ground in someone else's flaws. How far would any of us get if we were to say to people, let's talk about all the ways that you're messed up? Not very far. Because pride and shame and insecurity will cause them to reject that whole set of ideas. But we can reach people if we're able to courageously tell the truth about ourselves. If we can share our testimony in a gracious way, then people might start to see that when Christians are doing it right, we're humble, not self-righteous. We don't elevate ourselves above anyone. We're all sinners in need of God's grace. We're loving, not hateful. And far from being excluding, our mission in life is not to operate our little club apart from the communities around us, but to invite all the world to join us and become members. We just had a presidential election, and the right is celebrating. The left had their dreams crushed. Well, 4 years ago, it was the other way around. Remember those two levers that politicians use to manipulate people? Fear and the need for a hero? Well, even after election, the fear-mongering never stops. And after the delusions fade, it doesn't take long for people to see that none of these politicians are heroes. So many people put their trust and their hopes of the future in a president, and it gives them no peace. But we live in the peace of Christ. When all is said and done, it doesn't matter to us who sits in the White House, because we live for and put our trust in the one who sits on the throne. In these uncertain times, if we can extend grace in the pivotal moments, even to those who hate us, we can bring true peace, true healing, and true salvation to a country that badly needs it.